The following audio recording has been designed for learning purposes only. Do not share, distribute, or provide any type of copies, or this audio lesson will not be made available to you. Good luck with today's lesson.
Looking really good. Okay, so far, I'm liking what I'm seeing. Once again, some of you already heard this, so apologies. And I'm going to say it again. The only thing, and it's a common thing, it's the thing I see every time we have a project like this in every class. I don't want people to get married to their designs. Okay, here's something I actually did in another class, and imagine how well this went over. Okay, everybody built a design for animation, and because I am such a fiend of the highest order, I took everybody's design and I gave it to a different person in class. Oh, that evil fiend. Okay, and I did that to prove a point. Now, I'm not going to do that to you guys, or am I? No, I'm not. Or am I? No, I'm not. I'm not. You can breathe again. I promise I won't do that. But I did that not to be a fiend, okay, but to make sure that we were keeping a little bit of distance, okay, not a lot, but at least a little bit of, I'm going to call it professional distance, between what we are creating and what we are ending up with as an animation. Okay, notice how when I said just the mere idea of that, there were a lot of people that were like, "Oh shit, oh that better not happen." Okay, which is totally understandable. I totally get that. Okay, but ask yourself why you were so worried about that occurring. Yeah, well, I built this, and I know how it's built, and I had an idea, and I was going to do this, and I was going to do that. Yeah. And then that leads to more things that can get in the way of the actual project, right? Like, I'm so married to the way that I want to make this. Sean, how come we don't have any tools that can realize my vision? Well, because we're not on an exercise that uses the tools that you want to learn. We're on this exercise doing all this stuff. You're way over there on the Black Diamond ski slope. We're back here on the kiddie slope, just trying to learn how to go down straight. You're just going off to get yourself killed, and meanwhile, we're over here just learning the tools. So keep in mind, whatever it is that you're coming up with, try and maintain a little bit of distance from what it is to you and what it's supposed to be for the project. You want a lot of great information that you can capture and then manipulate inside of After Effects to make something even greater. Okay. The last thing that should happen, and unfortunately does happen from time to time in every project, is you're going to make the design. Wow, there it is. It looks amazing. Wait, I have to animate this now. And I only got a day to do it. What do you mean I got to animate this now? Look what I made. Yeah. We made a thing that has nothing to do with what we're learning, really, because we're trying to learn how to animate, right? So is that making sense? And again, this isn't a complaint or me trying to scare anybody, or, it's just an idea based on the experience of seeing this happen before as an instructor many, many, many times, that I want you to just carry with you while you're going through your project. Okay? The sooner you can get your work, and again, not trying to rush it, but the sooner you can get your work into After Effects to see it move. A couple of you did that, and I'd be willing to bet that your designs evolved immediately as soon as you saw them move. Like, oh snap, I need to change this, I need to add that, I need to play with this should be bigger, that should be smaller. And that's what I want to see happen for you guys. I want those creative sparks as motion designers to start kicking in, not just designers. And I am super thrilled, by the way, at what I am seeing from everybody as far as engagement on this lesson. That's why I have to say this. Normally, well, not normally. I shouldn't say normally. In the bad version of this conversation, I'd be trying to get you motivated to do the work, right? And that's not the normal conversation that we're having. Instead, I'm trying to make sure you don't get too involved. That's the kind of conversation we like having, right? I like having to pull you back. Like, let me go, let me get this. Great. I love being the person going, no, rein it in a little bit. okay, as opposed to the person who's trying to push you into doing what you need to do, okay? So everybody's doing a great job. I'm very, very happy. This isn't a complaint. It's just a little bit of a warning, okay? So I'm going to show you guys some stuff in a few minutes. It's almost break time, so I don't want to start a lecture before people get a chance to hit the restroom or do whatever they need to do before we start our talk. I want to show you a little bit about building grids inside of Illustrator and some of the other animation techniques that are based on some of the things we saw in the last class. Why grids in Illustrator if you're talking about animation? Because using the tool that I want to make sure you guys know, you can build all sorts of grid-like elements in a fraction of the time. If I were to ask you how to build a grid, I'm pretty confident the answer you give me is going to be way more technical than it needs to be. And I want you to know the easy way. Okay? That way you can add more things and be faster and have more time then to be creative with the motion inside of After Effects. Okay? So we're going to cover that. At the same time, we're going to cover some of the other tools in After Effects. And after that, we'll be right back to what we're doing right now, playing with both our design and also getting things into After Effects. And again, if you take something, and I think I need to make this clear as well. If you make something in Illustrator and then move it into After Effects, even though in the demo it kind of looked this way, because I had to get stuff ready for animation, so let me make it and now let me animate it. That's not going to be the process over the entire life of the project. You're going to be making things and animating things at the same time, back and forth. So you'll have maybe 5 Illustrator files, little things that you started in Illustrator and then finished in After Effects. And then in After Effects, you'll build more things and maybe even export frames out of After Effects back to Illustrator so that you can see what they look like and build more elements in Illustrator to go with that. Okay, so it's a very fluid process, a very back and forth process. So don't be afraid to take a half-done design and throw it into After Effects to see what can be done with what you have. Okay? Because that's a great way to judge, you know, if for no other reason, that's a great way to judge whether or not you need to draw certain things. You know, you're going to use like 3 circles, you know, doing something that you've already kind of mapped out in your head. Well, maybe you don't need to make those circles inside of Illustrator, knowing that you're going to use the After Effects circle, the shape layer circle anyways, right? So you can go right into After Effects, just make those circles, and then take the other stuff from Illustrator that you know you need made in there, and bring that in, okay? So we're motion designers, so we get to be fluid about that, okay? I love the fact that you guys are trying to make everything mapped out one step at a time, because that means you're trying to be methodical. And I don't want to ever try and break you of that habit, but the process is what it is for us as motion designers, and it requires the ability to thought back and forth. Okay? So take your break if you need it, and in about 5 to 10, we're going to start this discussion, which shouldn't last too long, and then we'll move on from there. And you guys will have the rest of the class to work and ask questions, and we'll get them done. Make cool stuff and take over. Suddenly I feel like this turned into a rah-rah speech, and I'm coach. We'll crush our enemies. What's the speech that Conan gives? Kill your enemies, crush their bones, and hear the lament of their children. What does he say?
They're women.
They're women and children. Is that what it is, or is it the women?
It's the lamentation of their women.
That's what it is. Lamentation of their women. Go now, run! He is both the easiest and also most fun person to talk like.
To pretend.
Yeah, he's just the best. Predator was on like a week ago on like AMC or something. I felt like I was like 11 years old again. You know, no, I would have been 13 when that came out. I just sat there and watched the whole movie.
We're gonna jump right in and get.
So great. It was on regular TV too, which is awful. Because they cut out all the awesome bad words and extra blood and guts. Yeah, right?
That like ruins the movie. That ruins the movie.
It does. For me, it does. And then they have all the doofy commercials because they want to make money. How dare they?
Ah, so good.
You could probably watch it on Netflix, though. I mean, it's kind of.
Oh, I'm sure there's plenty of easy ways to watch it. It's one of those things where, like I've even said this to my wife before, she'll turn something on and she'll start watching it on like regular television. And I'm sure I've done this too. And like right over on the shelf is the exact same Blu-ray of the movie that we've got on and we're seeing commercials of. Rogue One was on. And she was watching that. And she's like, tell me when it comes back on. I got to go check my school mail. Like, where are you going? The DVD's right, or the Blu-ray's right there. We can just go do that and we'll pop the thing on and see it nice and clean. And no, it's too much work. Nah, I'll just watch it like this. And I did the exact same thing because I know I've probably got 50 copies in varying, like all the way from VHS to whatever it is now of that movie. And it was like, nah, it's on AMC. I'll just watch this. Because we're all creatures of habit.
I don't have cable anymore. I just have antenna.
I don't blame you. It's ridiculous now. More ridiculous than it's ever been. The cost and what you have to get. Like we have cable, and I still have to pay for like 2 streaming services to see the stuff that I want to see. A lot more so if I really wanted to see all the stuff that I wanted to see, but. Oh well. Everybody keeps telling me to get into Sling because you can see all of it through Sling or whatever, and it's like,
Sling, I don't know what Sling is.
It's the same as the other. It's a way to access all of that content, basically. Honestly, I didn't know about it until I saw the commercial with Ron Swanson and his wife, and then I was like, oh, okay.
I just have antenna, and you know what? You can't watch it. Antenna. You can't watch antenna.
it's tough. They've made it tough because they actually stopped carrying like a couple of years ago. They said, all right, this goes away. You have to have a connection now. Which, like, you can buy a device that allows the antenna to catch more signal.
I have a high def antenna, but it's crappy as hell.
Yeah, it still isn't that great. It gets worse all the time.
Okay, we're going to take a look at some techniques inside of After Effects to enhance what we've kind of built in this example right here. But first, we're going to jump into Illustrator because for a few minutes, I just want to talk about other ways that we can build elements for animation. Primarily grid elements, right? Because, we might need some sort of a background interface of some sort that houses our UI. And building grids is actually something that's pretty simple to do. So we're going to make a new document. And I'm going to make this the composition size that we're working at, which is 1920 by 1080. So let me click Create. And let's say that in this animation, if we jump back here for a second, we just let this play. Maybe behind this we want some sort of a grid that shows up that we can see. Maybe it doesn't do anything. Maybe it's just like the layout area for the elements that we're animating on screen. So let's jump back into Illustrator and let's look at how that can be done using the transform effect. Okay, one of the cooler and lesser known tools inside of Illustrator. Hopefully you've seen this before. And if you haven't, it's a good thing we're looking at it now. Let's start with just a typical grid. Okay, so I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. I'm going to click, and I'm just going to make an atypical grid. And let's just make this for now, let's say, well, 100 pixels by 100 pixels sounds pretty good. Let's click OK. And that gives us a box. Now I'm going to take this box, I'm going to get rid of the fill, and I want to put this box into this corner over here, the top left corner. Now I can do this inside of Illustrator easily as long as I've got Align to Artboard turned on for my Align tools. Now if you don't see this toolbar up top, if you go under Window and then go down to Workspace, you can choose Essentials Classic, And if you have, and you still don't see this toolbar at the top, you can go under here and choose Reset Essentials Classic, and that'll bring this up. And I'm going to click on these tools. First this one, the horizontal align left tool, and then the vertical align top tool, and that pushes this box right into the corner. Okay. Now I'm going to go up to Effect, and I'm going to go down to Distort and Transform, and I'm going to choose Transform here. Okay. And that's going to give me the Transform Effect panel. And I'm going to use this. Now remember, the box I made was 100 pixels by 100 pixels. That's important, okay? Because I'm going to come down here where it says Copies, and I'm going to set this to maybe 15. And I'm going to turn on Preview. And then if I grab Move, you're going to see a bunch of copies come out of that first box. Okay, now the box itself was 100 pixels wide, so if I type 100 in here for Move, and then turn on and off preview, we can see that my 15 copies go all the way across the screen, and I'll have to click OK to see if they go all the way across to the other side. They don't quite make it. Okay, but this is how I can get a row of objects very quickly. Okay, but wait, there's more. Again, we didn't get all the way across the screen, so I need at least another 3 to 4 boxes to do that. So I'm going to click on Transform right here. Okay, now this is the appearance panel that we're looking into, and we've got our original one box selected. Okay, and notice the little effects icon. We're used to seeing this in Photoshop with layer styles. This is kind of a similar thing. I'm going to click on Transform, and let's add maybe 4 more copies to this. So let's make this 19. Turn on preview, and that definitely carries us right off the screen. Okay. And that's great for one row, but what if we don't want one row? What if we want, a grid? Well, all we have to do is keep this object selected. Let's go under Effect again, back to Distort and Transform, and let's choose Transform again. And Illustrator is going to say, hey, you sure you want to do that? This is going to apply another instance, and of course we do. So we're going to click Apply New Effect. And then with this window, I'm going to turn on Preview again. I'm going to add maybe, let's do 15 copies again. And this time vertically, we're going to move all of those pieces down. Okay, so that one row that we created, we are now multiplying that entire row because we added a second instance of the transform effect. So this needs to be 100. And clearly we don't need 15 because this goes off screen with room to spare. So let's take this back to maybe 13. And that's too many still. Let's go to 11. And that's too many still. Let's go to 9. And 9's not quite enough, so 10 copies does it. We can see that there. I'm going to click OK. So now we've got a grid of squares that clearly is big enough to sit on screen. Okay, in fact, we've got a row that's running off and a column that's also running off. Okay, if we wanted to address that, and we would go up to File, down to Document Setup, and then we would come in here, click on Edit Artboards, and we would change our numbers up top here. Now we know that 1920 is the width, right? And we can see that we're short. So let's just take 1920 and add 80 to it, because these are all 100 pixels in width and height. So we'll make this 2000. And then let's grab 180 and change this to 1100. Okay. And then all we have to do is take this original box and make sure that it sits in the corner properly. And now we've got a evenly spaced grid where all the boxes are visible, and we can export this entire thing over to After Effects. The really cool thing about this is if I hit Command Y, we still only have just the one box. Okay? Pretty neat. Now let's make it neater. We've got one box, and from that we've made all these different copies. This box is basically a line with a stroke value of 1 point. So let's take that 1 point stroke, let's change that to maybe 0.5. Let's make it real thin. Okay. And let's duplicate this layer. We'll lock the first one. In the second, we're going to select this box. Let's maybe make this line thicker. Let's make it 1 point. Let's make it 2 point maybe. And then let's make it smaller. Okay, so I'm going to hold down the Option and Shift keys and just make this box smaller. Okay. It's moving that 100 pixel distance all the way across and down. So this shape now, if we modify it, okay, it's going to modify from the center point outward. So that looks pretty good. And let's take this, let's not be done. Let's duplicate this. Whole entire layer. We'll lock that. We'll take this shape, we'll make it even smaller. And instead of the stroke, let's make this a fill. So Shift X to flip the value. Let's zoom in on this box. So now it's a filled box. And we've got our corner widgets. I'm going to pull on those to turn this box into a circle. Now we've got these little dots that are also a grid element. Then I'm going to take this line, and instead of it being black, I'm going to make this maybe gray. So like a medium gray. That looks good. And now we've got this that we can save off as one element for After Effects, right? We can lock these layers, we can name them too. We can call this maybe thin grid. Thick grid, and then dots. Okay. Now, what if we wanted this to be different? Okay. Let's say we take thick grid, let's duplicate that. And on the duplicate, let's select our box. Let's make this a little bit smaller. Let's shift that value. Okay. And you know what? Instead of making it smaller, let's make it larger. Let's make it like that big. Okay, so it's just slightly bigger, okay, than that initial thick object. And let's say I only want these for a portion of this grid. Okay, so I don't want to have this box fill every one of these squares the way that it is right now. I'm going to take this grid, I'm going to go under Object, and I'm going to choose Expand Appearance. Okay, and that makes all of those boxes that I can select. Okay, and let's say that I just want those boxes to be maybe in the center. I want to get rid of the 2 rows running this way. So if I grab all of these by selecting any of them and choose Ungroup, that should allow me to select individual boxes. There we go. Let's delete those. And I'm going to have to select all of these and hit Ungroup again. Now I can select these. And these. And these. Okay, so now those are all gone. And the center of this would be like basically these two right here. And if we go out from there, we'll We'll go up one row. We'll go down one row. We can grab these boxes, maybe put them on a separate layer. We'll call this inner boxes, and we'll call this center boxes. And that looks pretty good. So let's save this. And we'll save this to the desktop. And we'll click OK. Now that's cool, except my shapes are based on that hex pattern, right? And if we look at this again, we can see how this hex pattern lays out. It's flat on the bottom and the top, and then angular on the sides. So let's go back to Illustrator. Let's make another new document. Start with the same size. And let's grab our polygon tool. And if we double click it, we can just add a six-sided polygon right in the middle of the screen. So let's put that there. Okay. And if I take this and just duplicate it across, we can see what will happen if I use transform, right? We're going to get that. Okay. Now, I'm going to try and get rid of this garbage. Skip the tour. Let's delete this shape. Let's make another one for a second. The radius is 50 pixels. We want to remember that. Okay, that's our radius. Okay, what's a radius? Huh?
Half the distance. Yes.
Half the distance, right? So if I bring up Marquee and I make a 100 pixel box and I take this and I put it in there, okay, we can see that the size from side to side makes sense because we just double the radius. But this is an oblong shape, so we've got a distance here that we're going to have to cover too that's going to be less than 100. Right? So just taking this object and trying to pull it across to make another object, again, like the tool allows us to do, is going to be a little bit tricky. So we're not going to do that. We're going to do this. We're going to take this object. We're going to use the smart cursor like you saw. Okay, right now we're seeing the smart cursor. Smart cursor is Command U to toggle that on and off like we talked about before. We're going to use the smart cursor to give us something that we can start with that will make more sense, at least initially, when we start to pull this over to make our pattern. So we're going to take all three of these shapes, which is what I want you to see. We're going to group them together. We're going to take this, we're going to put it right up here. Okay? So it's not quite aligned the way that the box was. That was a perfect fit into the corner, but it's close. Okay? And let's, with this group now, go back up to Effect, over to Distort and Transform, Transform. Let's turn on Preview. Let's make 2 copies for now. And let's move this horizontally. Okay. And we can see what's happening. Let's go another, let's go 200. Okay, preview on, preview off. All right, so we know, let's try 150. 150 seems to get it, right? That looks pretty good. So let's go copies 2, let's go copies 10. And that looks like it goes off screen. Let's check that. Not quite there. So we'll bring back our transform with the appearance palette. Let's make this 12. And that gets us off the screen. That's pretty good. Okay, so that looks all right. The problem is going down. Okay. Now there's a couple of ways we can handle this. We have a group, right? So I can just find that piece right there. Now that we've got this aligned, and I can turn that off. And then I can grab my initial setup and add transform to it again. Okay, and then from here, if I turn on preview and copies, let's just do one copy for now. I can grab the vertical value and pull this down until this lines up. And it looks like 86 is the winner. Let's try 85. I bet you it's 85. Okay, so we can do that and then come down here and type 10 copies. And that looks pretty good. Doesn't quite make it off screen. So let's adjust that. Let's click on this bottom transform and add 2 more copies. Okay. So now it goes off screen. And if we go back into document setup, right? So document setup, click on edit artboards. We can actually drag this out. And it looks like we want to be right around 1975. And 1150. Okay, so now we've got an object that does what we want it to do. Let's take the fill and get rid of it again. So we have to select our original shapes, remove the fill. Okay. And we can zoom in and see that our lines are just a hair off on our duplicate going down. So let's maybe grab this again. Click on transform down. Let's try 86 again. It's actually pretty good. Let's try 87. It's even better. Maybe it's 86.5. Let's try that. There we go. That's the winner. So now we've got a perfect grid. Right, it goes off screen a little bit more, so let's go back into document setup, which we can do here, edit artboards, and then just pull that down. It looks like our number is probably 1170. Let's just hit that. There we go. And looking at this, same game plan. I'm going to take this object. I'm going to duplicate this entire layer. I'm going to come under here. I'm going to go under my group. I'm going to grab this object. I'm going to hit scale. I'm going to double click it. Keep uniform scale on and make this like 80%. So uniform scale, 80%. Okay, and if I turn on preview, you can see what that does. Okay. Let's grab the other box. This one. And let's bring up scale. I had copy turned on. I don't want to copy this. Or I hit copy. Let's make this one 50. Okay. And let's flip this so that it looks like that. Okay, and maybe this box, let's select that one. Maybe this is lighter also. There we go. Okay, and this line, let's grab that line, check our stroke, maybe make that 0.5. Okay. Now, we've got a pretty fancy looking grid here. Let's take this, let's save this one. Call this grid pattern 02. And one more time. Let's come in here. Let's click create. Let's grab an ellipse. Let's make a 100 by 100 circle. No. Let's grab the ellipse, L key. Let's just click. Let's make this a 500 by 500 circle. Yes. Then we'll center this one. And let's go back under here. Let's go down to distort and transform. Transform. Well, I don't want to move this circle left, right, up, or down this time. Okay, I'm going to play around with copies. Let's make 5 copies and play around with maybe horizontal and vertical scale. Okay. So maybe I want this to be 105 and 105. So let's play with that. And now I can make a row of concentric circles that expand out of the center, right? So let's say I want this to be 104 and 104. And let's say I want 8 copies. Okay, so let's click OK. Let's get rid of the fill. And I'm going to take these copies, I'm going to go up to Object and Expand Appearance again. Okay, and now I can zoom in on these lines. I can grab this one, maybe change it to 2 point, and I have to ungroup them all. Forgot to do that. There we go. I can grab this one, make it maybe 2 or 3 point. I can grab that one, make it 0.5. Maybe these 3 are really thick, and maybe they're a lighter color. Maybe this one is also fairly thick. Maybe this one doesn't sit there. Maybe we take this one and expand it so that it's out here. Then maybe we take this one and make it smaller so that it's right there. Okay? So very quickly, I can get all sorts of shapes that I can start with right inside of After Effects. Let's call this reticle without the L in front. Boop. And we'll save this. We'll click OK. And let's go over to After Effects so that we can see these elements inside here. We got 3 different grids to play with. Let's pick grid pattern 02. Let's turn off this Illustrator PDF EPS sequence button. That should basically always be off. And I want to bring this in as a composition with the Retain Layer Sizes option. I'm going to click Open. And if I go into Grid Pattern, notice what we see. What do we see? Remember the last class, and remember what we talked about regarding our whole project, right? This is on black right now, and that's begins with a B, then an A, followed by a D. Put those 3 letters together. What's, huh? Yeah, it's bad because we can't see it. It's on black. Black light on black. Yeah. So how are we going to fix that? We're going to select this layer right here. We're going to come over to Effects and Presets. And we're going to type Invert. We're going to drop that right on the effect. Oh, okay. That brings that back. We'll drop that on the other effect as well. Now we can see our grid. Okay, instead of worrying about changing those line colors in Illustrator, you can add the invert effect to flop the values from black to white. Now, why don't we just do that? Why did we have to worry in the last class about changing the value of the line? Because it's one more effect that you have to add in order to get this to work. Okay, but here's our pre-comp, and it's got this grid. Okay, now it's a pre-comp because we're going to put this into our other shot. But watch what happens when we put this into our other shot. I'm going to leave this as is, other than to go into demo and grab, I think it's that first layer that we saw, this one. Yeah, that's our tint layer. So this should have been named, let's call this tint. I'm going to grab the tint adjustment layer, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to go back to grid pattern 02, I'm going to paste that in here. Okay, and we can see something's happening on the edges. We're going to talk about that. Don't worry about that right now. In fact, it's kind of good that that's happening. We're going to take this, we're going to go back over to Demo 3D. In our project, grid pattern 2 is right here. Let's back this up. Let's push this up like that. And we're going to drop grid pattern 2 right there. Okay? And there it is. And it's under everything, and that's kind of cool. And we're going to turn on 3D, and now it's going to snap right into position. Okay? So it's in position. We're going to take our camera for now, both our cameras. We're going to select them both and just turn off depth of field for now. Okay? But if we look at this, okay, yeah, you know, we've got the grid in there, but it gets cut off, right? We need to fix the fact that it's getting cut off because, you know, it doesn't look good being cut off. Plus, it's a little bright. Plus, that adjustment layer is not working, right? So we're going to go back into grid pattern here. This is an Illustrator file, okay? I'm going to bring up composition settings. I've got the aspect ratio button locked. So now if I change one size, it's going to change both. Let's take this number and put a asterisk at the end of it and type 2. The asterisk is a multiply symbol, okay? So it stands for multiplication. So if I take this number and multiply it by 2, I've made this double the size. Okay? So I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click on both of these elements. I'm going to bring up scale, and I'm going to make them 200%. And they scale out to the edges. But if I zoom in, they're a little bit blurry now. Why are they a little bit blurry? Because we scaled them up to 200%, but they're vector. What do we have to do? As he points to it on screen, yeah, we got to turn that on. Now everything tightens up. Okay, now the one thing I do have to do is push this into position. It's shifted slightly, so let's put that there. Okay. And then we're going to grab our tint adjustment layer and resize that. So we're going to go under solid settings, because that's technically what an adjustment layer is. And we're just going to click make comp size. And it'll just flow to the size of the composition. Okay, now it does that, but I still have to align it to the composition to make sure that it covers all edges perfectly. So if I select this, I have the same align controls in After Effects that I have in Illustrator. I'm going to make sure that I can see them, and then I'm going to click these buttons to align that adjustment layer right in the center. Okay, and now we got that. And then I'm going to grab my tint value, and I'm going to lower the tint color here. Like, I want it to be saturated, but I don't want it to be so bright. Let's maybe make it a little more blue, and just make sure that this color is a little dark. There we go. Now if I go back into my Demo 3D main comp, this definitely is large enough. I'm going to grab this grid pattern, because it's a three-dimensional layer, and I'm going to pull it into the scene now. I'm going to pull it back, maybe to right there. And I can make this a screen layer, and then duplicate the pattern. Grab that duplicate, Pull that back slightly. Yeah, we'll make this 400 since the other one's 360. Then I can take this duplicate and again lower the opacity to, you know, like 40 or 35. Okay. And that looks pretty good. And then if I go into, let's say, the project panel, and I grab grid pattern here, I can duplicate this now that I've got it set up. And I can bring up 03. And then maybe just turn off one of these layers and maybe change the color, right? So if I click on tint, let's click on this color. Let's maybe brighten it up here. We'll click OK. And then let's go back to Demo 3D. Let's take our original pattern, let's duplicate it. And I can replace a layer with another layer from my project panel by selecting the layer I want to replace, and at the same time the layer I want it replaced with in the project panel, if I hold down the Option key, I can drag one on top of the other and it replaces it instantly. Okay? And then let's grab position, maybe set this to like 320. There we go. And then if I go back into my original demo here, okay, and let's grab, we've got that, and we've got these pieces here. Let's maybe grab this layer. We're going to duplicate it, drag it beneath everything. We're going to solo this, go like that so we can see it. Let's unlock this. Let's go under Contents, under Group 1, where we've got all this animation happening. Let's hide the stroke, and we'll click on Group 1 and add a fill, which we can do whenever we want. And then this fill, we're going to make this a dark, like blue color, something like that maybe. That looks pretty good. Okay, now if I show everything, that's fine that we've got this dark layer back here. Let's unlock this and call this dark fill. But we're still not going to see it in our main composition, okay, because this is set to screen, right? All these demo pieces. So if I come back here and I duplicate this layer, let's turn this dark fill off. Let's duplicate demo again. We got demo 3. Let's turn off everything except for the tint and the dark fill now, right? So we have this. Maybe we've got another element too. Maybe this layer, and then let's duplicate this. And maybe this duplicate shape is larger. So we can just scale this up, actually. We'll do this quick. We'll scale this. And we'll lower the opacity. T key, let's take this down to maybe there. So right around 50. So now we've got demo 3 here. Let's go back to our 3D layer. Let's duplicate demo. Select that, select demo 3, and Option key to replace. And then I'm going to set this to normal. And we're going to have this big object now right inside of our shot that we can see here. Now I have to change the opacity of this layer, so T key. Take this up to 100, and let's bring up position. We'll probably have to take this back to 0 to start on the Z. Okay. But now we've got that object, Let's move it back to 20. Okay? And that kind of breaks everything up behind this object so that we can see. Right? And if I take this layer, okay, and I scale it up, let's make it 150. That fills more of the space, and that looks pretty good. Okay, in fact, let's go a little larger. Let's go 165. Okay? But it's not tight the way that everything was before because we've just scaled up these objects. Okay, here's where it gets really fun. Let's go back into Demo 3. Let's call this Dark Objects. So we know what's happening. Dark hexes. Sounds like something from Supernatural. You got cursed with a dark hex, Dean. Oh no, Sam. So we're going to take this. We're going to flip on toggle switches and modes. And what I want to do in Demo 3D is make this the same as what we did when we scaled up those hex elements in our pre-comps, right? We turned on continuous rasterization. I can do that here. Except when I do that here, it's going to break, right? The reason it broke is because what continuous rasterization does to a pre-comp is this. It gets rid of the pre-comp in After Effects' mind. So now we're seeing just those two-dimensional layers inside the pre-comp in this parent composition. Okay? Well, I want that because I want the continuous rasterization to work here like it does for shape layers. But in order to get this to also be in 3D the way that this object is in 3D, the pre-comp, I have to come in here, select these two layers, and actually make them three-dimensional layers in here. Even though it doesn't change anything, I don't have to move them or change their position at all. I can just turn that on, and then if I come back here, now those objects sit where they're supposed to sit. Okay? And I can back this up. We can kind of see those shapes. If I turn this on and off, right, they're kind of taking over the screen right now. Let's set this back to 100. Okay. There we go. And I'm going to have to add the tint to the layer in here also, or at least to those layers. So let's take this back up to 150. Actually, I like the original size, 165. But again, if I zoom in on this now, we can see that that's really tight. Okay, nice and clean the way that we wanted it. Whereas before, you can see the blur, right? Now, why did I have to turn off the adjustment layer? Because, again, Collapse Transforms wants to make this happen in the parent composition. It ignores the fact that there's a pre-comp with elements in it, and it just sees those elements. So just like here, where I had to turn on 3D for these layers, even though it's not technically a three-dimensional composition, I had to turn off my tint effect. Okay, which means these objects, if I want them to have a dark blue tint, I'm going to have to actually make sure that they do. Okay, which is again what we already did, but still. Okay, let's lock that down. Then you can see that there, and I can even set those individual layers in here to blend modes if I wanted to. I could grab these and set them both to multiply. And then that would carry over to this composition, and you can see that there. Okay? And again, all we did was add a background. Right? This is from a really extreme angle, obviously, so we'd probably want to wall that off in some way. But I can take these objects and get really kind of complex with them, with what we do with them. I can grab these grid patterns. Let's maybe try and wonk out the parallax a little bit. Like those are going back pretty far right now. But let's take maybe all three of these and push them back even further. So let's maybe take this number, grid pattern 02, which is that one. Let's set that to 800. Then this one, let's make it maybe 600. And this one we can set to maybe 400. And the further back in space they go, maybe we duplicate this one once. Send that back to like 420. There we go. That looks good. So now when this kind of animates on screen with the camera spinning around the interface, we're going to get all this fun parallax too. Okay? And parallax is what we see when the camera moves in a scene that has 3 dimensions. Objects that are away from one another, they'll have depth, and we can actually see that depth. Okay? Because elements that are further away will move, in this case, probably a little bit faster because of how we're turning through the scene than the objects that are closer. Okay? So it's that relationship of objects that are separated in Z space from one another when we move around a 3-dimensional camera. Right? You can start to see that right now if I let this play. Like, see how that motion is, very 3-dimensional because we're seeing all these shapes kind of running through everything. Okay. Cool so far? Everybody's good? We're liking what we're seeing? Okay, let me show you one more thing. We're going to call it after this. It's only because I like you guys that I'm going to show you this. Otherwise I wouldn't. So let's go into dark hex. Let's grab dark fill here. We're going to copy this. We're going to bring this into our demo 3D composition. We're going to paste this. Okay. Now this doesn't always work, and you'll see why. But I want to show you this little trick. Okay, this is already a 3D layer. I'm going to come up to where it says Classic 3D. And I'm going to change this from Classic 3D by clicking that button and then going into this list. I'm going to choose Cinema 4D. Now there are certain things that are going to work, and then there are going to be certain things that aren't going to work. And you'll see how we get around that in a minute. Okay, but just to understand what I said, we're turning this into 3D. We're going to click OK. A bunch of things are not going to be able to work the way that they normally do, and that's why things are looking different. But we're going to take this object, dark fill, and if we go under here now, we have the ability to extrude this object. Okay, so let's give this an extrusion value, okay, of like 136. That's fine. Okay. Now I'm going to add a light to the scene. I'm going to bring up a light layer, new light. We'll make this a blue-ish kind of a point light. And we'll keep it set to 100. That's going to drop right in the center of the scene. And to make this simpler, I'm just going to show these 2 layers and then the background. Okay. So let's grab our point light wherever that is. There it is. And let's really just push the light on this. Let's hit the A key twice. We'll turn up the intensity. We can see it kind of run over this shape. And then let's take this light. Let's duplicate it. Let's pull the duplicate down here. We're using the X, Y, and Z values to kind of move this light around. We'll put one down here. That kind of lights up this corner. And we can brighten this up a little bit. And then we could duplicate this again. Move this light up here. And maybe over there. Just to catch that other face a little bit, okay? Bless you. Let's maybe crank that a little bit. So we've got these lights placed. Okay, we've got this object. All right. Let's take this object that we just extruded. Let's grab dark fill. And if we go under, there's so much with three-dimensional shapes inside of After Effects. Not enough time to cover it all. I just want to play with it for a second and do this. We're going to come under Contents, Group. We're going to turn off this fill and turn back on the stroke. Okay, there we had a stroke and we were using the dashes. Okay, so that in and of itself is pretty cool, but I'm just going to go under stroke. I'm going to get rid of the dashes. I'm going to increase the width of this stroke. I'm going to bring this color back to something like what it was. That's pretty good. We can see those lights kind of working off of everything nicely there. And we'll go with that. Now, this is already in a shot with a camera, right? We can see those cameras moving. Okay, now this is a trick that's going to confound a couple of people, and it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world to replicate. So watch very carefully, and I would use this sparingly. We got a whole lesson on 3D we're going to be getting into. Okay, but I'm going to take my three lights, my dark fill, I'm going to select them all. I'm going to right click, I'm going to pre-compose this. Call this 3D hex. Okay. So now I got all those pieces in that composition called 3D hex, and everything looks like it broke. That's fine. I'm going to go back into my composition settings over to 3D renderer. I'm going to set this back to classic 3D. Now that'll fix all the stuff in this shot, but this layer is still broke. I'm going to grab my cameras, and this is the key element. I'm going to select them both. I'm going to copy them. I'm going to go into my pre-comp with my three-dimensional shape and my lights. I'm going to paste the cameras in here. Okay. Now the expression errors is because these are linked to that focus null, but we can't pull depth of field focus on 3D layers anyway, so it's not going to matter. So don't worry about that message down there. In fact, let me grab these layers and just get rid of the expressions, because we can't use them. So bye-bye. So this is a pre-comp now. If I go back in here, this shows up and it looks like it did. Okay. I'm going to grab this layer. I can't turn on 3D for it, but I'm going to use a blend mode like screen. And then I'm going to drop this beneath my glows. And then I can take this object inside 3D hex and I can scale it up. Let's grab the scale tool. This is vector, so it's scalable. I can turn it up to like that big if I want. Right, now I've got this cool kind of three-dimensional element that's floating through the screen as well. And I can set this to add. Right, I can adjust, maybe not, that might be too bright. I can adjust the size and move the lights with the object when I do that. So let's make this 100 again. Let's grab our lights and just parent them to dark fill before I start scaling. Now if I set this to 200%, those lights scale out with the object and look like that in here. Okay. And I can take this version and duplicate it and set the duplicate maybe to normal or even multiply, right? Let's try multiply and then take the copy and turn down the opacity of it. So that it's just on a little bit underneath the object. I can take another version of this, duplicate it, come over here and type find edges. And I can drop the find edges plugin on that. Okay, what's find edges, Sean? Well, it's a tool that does this. Okay, it takes an object and it finds the edges of it, right? So now I've got this cool kind of all vector line that's kind of sitting on top of this as well. And I can composite this effect if I want to. I can take, these pieces and place them within the demo above and beneath other pieces, and that might change how much they stand out. Okay. I don't think I want this. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Okay, and we'll set that to maybe add instead of screen. That looks even better. And I can adjust the colors on this. If I want to grab tint and adjust the colors, I can do that, because it's basically just taking the values and flipping them. And we had a blue shape. So if I grab, the tint effect or levels first, let's grab levels. Add levels to this. Kind of go like that to make this line a little bit brighter. And then again, I can go under tint and kind of reapply that to make this a lighter color, like not quite as blue as it was before, like blue, but not super duper intense blue. Or I can make it green, or I can make it orange, right? Let me just make this orange. That could be cool. Yeah, that looks neat. Okay. So again, you can see how quickly this can start to get really complex, right? We can take that dark shape. We can scale this up even further maybe now. Maybe that animates up. We can take any one of these pattern pieces, lower the opacity of them as well, maybe 50. Or maybe that one we keep at 100 and we do one of the other ones, like, not that one. Maybe that one. Maybe we take this one and lower the opacity of that. So maybe we take that to 50. Okay? And again, the only thing we have to be wary of is the fact that this camera setup that's here, if we change that, we're going to have to change it inside of the three-dimensional comp as well that's given us these lines that we're seeing here. Okay? Now this is feeling like something from Tron.
Yeah, a little bit.
So if we look at it from maybe, let's go 1 second. 2 seconds will work. So this is full screen at full res. We've got the depth of field turned off temporarily. Okay. But again, this is one of the reasons why I'm saying that as you are building your design, I want you to stay fluid enough to make changes in ways that'll evolve your design and make it more exciting, right? I don't want you to get locked into something where you can't change your mind in lieu of something else that'll make your design pop a little bit more. Okay? I mean, you don't have to do everything that I'm showing you here, but there's a lot of different tools that we've looked at, and hopefully these are starting to spark a lot of different ideas in your minds as well. Okay? And again, we haven't really given this any purpose yet, right? I have to go in there and add, purpose to this design and make it mean something, right? But again, if we use our imagination, that should not be too hard to do because we've got so much happening here that we can work with. Okay? And again, I had to talk about it and show it to you, but besides that, it sure didn't take very long or very much effort to get all of this happening on top of what we already had. Okay? So there you go. So I'm going to put this video up. I'm going to stop it and let it... whoops, wrong one. And let it save. It's going to take a little bit to do that. And then once it's done, I'll make sure that it's uploaded. So you've got all this information to kind of carry with you while you're working, whether it be in the room or outside of the room somewhere else. I'm going to export the MP4 right away. And I think I'm going to take these elements, just like I did before, and put them up on Dropbox eventually so that you can kind of tear them apart if you need to. Okay? But again, this is animated gobbledygook, really, and yet there's a lot there visually that we can look at and really think about. Okay?
Good luck with today's lesson.